2 miles under the ice, our drill kissed a black shell that hummed like a far storm. Every compass spun. The wind outside went still, as if the world held its breath. We cleared the chamber, a vault, smooth as glass, oval and wrong. No hinges, no seams, just the feeling of being counted. The lid slid without moving. Cold light poured out. Frost raced across the floor and drew a living map of Earth. Coastlines pulled back like lips, the seas gone. Our headlamps dimmed. The air felt thick, sweet, too easy to breathe. Then letters formed in the rhyme. English older than English. Do not thaw what remembers you. Back out, someone said, but the cables had frost growing up them against gravity. The camp clock lost a minute and found a different minute instead. From the vault, a whisper said my name in a voice that was mine, only older. The cameras showed us standing in a circle, and in the reflection, we were missing people who were still beside us. The hum deepened, our chest straps synced, hearts slowed. The frost map changed, drawing a line due south beneath our boots. The vault wanted the ice warm. We came to open a box. The box remembered us first. That was 3 hours ago. Now I'm writing this in my bunk at Halley 6 Station, my fingers still numb despite the heater running full blast. The others are sleeping, or pretending to. Jake's been staring at the wall for 2 hours. Tommy keeps checking his reflection in the window, like he's expecting someone else to look back. I should explain how we got here, but every time I try to remember the details, they shift. The expedition started normal enough. I'm a glaciologist, part of the British Antarctic Survey's Deep Ice Core project. We've been stationed here since November, drilling samples from the Brunt ice shelf. Standard stuff. Climate data, ancient atmospheres locked in ice bubbles, that sort of thing. But yesterday, drill site Echo hit something that shouldn't exist. The penetrometer readings went haywire at 2.1 kilometers down. The core samples came up black, smooth, impossibly warm. When we lowered the fiber optic camera, it showed us nothing. Just darkness that seemed to watch back. Brett, our team leader, made the call to excavate, said the university would cream themselves over an anomaly this significant. We spent 16 hours with thermal lances, melting our way down to what we thought was bedrock. It wasn't bedrock. Now the others won't talk about what we saw. They can't, I think. Every time Jake tries, his words tangle up, come out backwards. Tommy just points south and shakes his head. Brett hasn't spoken since we sealed the access shaft, but I can still hear it. That hum threading through the ice, through the station's steel bones, getting stronger. The vault is still down there waiting, and I think it's learning our names. The morning briefing started with Brett's bloodshot eyes and a satellite phone that wouldn't dial out. Comms are fucked, he said, setting the dead handset on the metal table. Been trying McMurdo base since 0400, nothing but static. Halley 6 stretched around us in its familiar web of blue pods and connecting tunnels. Home for the past 3 months, perched on hydraulic legs that could lift us above the drifting snow. The rec module smelled of instant coffee and diesel heat, same as always. But Jake kept glancing at the windows like something might be watching back. Could be the solar storm, Tommy offered, but his voice carried no conviction. He'd been checking his pulse since breakfast, pressing 2 fingers to his wrist every few minutes. Met Office warned about electromagnetic interference. Brett's laugh came out sharp. Right, solar storms that make compasses spin backwards and freeze climbing ropes mid-air. I'd been thinking about that, how the frost had crawled up our cables yesterday. Defying gravity like ice could suddenly decide which way was up. The footage was on my laptop, but every time I tried to review it, the video files showed timestamps that didn't match our logs. 16 minutes of recording compressed into 3, or stretched into 47. We need to go back down, I said. The silence stretched uncomfortable. Outside, the wind had picked up again, rattling the station's joints. But underneath that familiar sound, I swear I could hear something else. A rhythm, like breathing. Absolutely not. Brett stood, his chair scraping metal floor. We seal that site, file the incident report, and wait for the next supply drop. Whatever's down there stays down there. Tommy's fingers found his wrist again. Maybe we should call... Call who? Brett's voice cracked slightly. Our sat phone's dead. Radio's picking up signals from fucking Mars, and according to GPS, we're currently stationed in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. That was news to me. I pulled out my phone, checked the coordinates. Brett was right. The display showed us floating somewhere between Hawaii and California. Impossible, but there it was, updating in real time. Jake finally spoke, his words careful and measured. The vault, it had writing on it, before we opened it. No, it didn't. Brett's response came too fast. Inside the lid, carved deep. You saw ice formations, crystal deposits, nothing more. But Jake's eyes found mine across the table, and I knew he'd seen the same thing I had. Letters older than any language I recognized, yet somehow readable. A warning we'd ignored. The station's heating system cycled on with its usual rumble, but something was different. The vents were pushing warmer air than normal. I checked the thermostat, still set to standard 18 degrees Celsius. The actual temperature reading showed 23 and climbing. Anyone else notice it's getting hot in here? I asked. Tommy's hand went to his collar, loosening the top button. Yeah, actually, feels like summer back in Yorkshire. Brett frowned, tapped the thermostat display. Systems malfunctioning. Must be a sensor issue. Or something's warming the ice beneath us, Jake said quietly. The lights flickered once, twice. Emergency power kicked in for half a second, bathing us in red before the normal fluorescence returned. In that brief, crimson moment, I could have sworn I saw someone else sitting at our table. A fifth person wearing clothes I didn't recognize, older style, different era entirely. Did you? I started, but Jake was already nodding. Saw him too. Brett slammed his hand on the table. Enough. We're dealing with equipment failures and sleep deprivation, nothing more. But his voice wavered, and when he turned toward the window, I caught him counting us. 1, 2, 3, 4. His lips moving silently, like he expected to find someone missing. The intercom crackled to life, our emergency channel supposedly restricted to Antarctic stations. A voice came through, distorted but unmistakably human. Halley 6, this is Shackleton Base, do you copy? Brett grabbed the handset. Shackleton Base, this is Halley 6. We copy. What's your status? Static for several seconds. Then, we found something in the ice. Something that's been waiting. Tommy's face went pale. Shackleton Base was abandoned in 1982. The voice continued, clearer now. The chamber beneath your station. You need to seal it permanently, before it reaches the surface. Brett's hand shook as he keyed the mic. Who is this? Identify yourself. This is Dr. William Thornton, glaciology team. The date is March 15th, 1981. If you're receiving this transmission, you're already too late. The channel went dead. We sat in silence, processing what we'd heard. Outside, the wind had stopped completely. The station felt suspended in a bubble of stillness, like the entire continent was holding its breath. Jake's voice came out as a whisper. The thermal readings from yesterday. The drill site is still active. Temperatures rising every hour. I pulled up the sensor logs on my tablet. He was right. The sealed excavation site was showing ambient temperatures of 28 degrees Celsius and climbing. 2 kilometers down, something was generating heat. We have to go back, I said. We need to see what's happening. Brett stood abruptly, his chair toppling backwards. No one goes near that site. That's a direct order. But even as he said it, I could see the doubt in his eyes. The same questions eating at all of us. What had we really found down there? And why did it feel like it was finding us in return? Tommy checked his pulse again, then looked up with an expression I'd never seen before. Fear mixed with something else. Recognition. It knows our names, he said simply. The seismic equipment registered the first tremor at 14:30 GMT. I was alone in the lab pod when the needles jumped, scratching jagged lines across the recording paper. Not an earthquake. The pattern was wrong, too regular, too deliberate, like something massive taking a breath 2 kilometers beneath our feet. The station's heating system had been running non-stop for 3 hours. Internal temperature now sat at 31 degrees. Tommy had stripped down to his thermal underwear and was still sweating. Brett kept adjusting the thermostat, swearing at readings that made no sense. "Fuck this," Jake muttered, wiping his forehead with a damp sleeve. "I'm checking the drill site." "You're not going anywhere near," Brett started, but another tremor cut him off. This one stronger. The coffee mug on my desk slid 3 inches before stopping. Through the lab's window, I watched the ice shimmer in the distance. Heat haze, impossible in Antarctica, rising from the sealed excavation site like summer asphalt. The emergency markers we'd planted around the perimeter had melted into the surface, leaving only their plastic tops visible. My tablet chimed with an incoming data stream. The underground sensors we'd left in place before sealing the site were still transmitting. Temperature readings climbed past 35 degrees, atmospheric pressure dropping, and something else, electromagnetic readings that spiked and fell in patterns I'd never seen before. "Brett," I called, "you need to see this." He crossed from the main pod, followed by Tommy and Jake. The tablet's screen showed real-time data from our instruments, now 2 kilometers down in what should have been solid ice. "That's impossible," Tommy said, pointing at the atmospheric readings. "Look at the oxygen levels." He was right. The sealed chamber was showing 94% oxygen content, nearly pure breathable atmosphere. At that depth, under that much ice, it should be carbon dioxide and trace gases. Nothing could survive down there, let alone breathe. Jake leaned closer to the screen. "What's that?" A new data stream had appeared. Audio sensors. We hadn't installed audio sensors. The sound quality was poor, full of static and interference, but underneath the noise, I could make out something that raised the hair on my arms. Voices. Multiple voices, speaking in harmony. Too distant to understand, but definitely human. "Could be interference," Brett said, but he was reaching for the emergency sat phone again. Still dead. The voices grew clearer as I adjusted the audio filters. Words emerged from the static. English, but accented in a way I couldn't place. Old-fashioned pronunciation, like recordings from the 1940s. Coordinates confirmed. The chamber responds to proximity. Temperature rising faster than projected. Subjects showing signs of integration. Tommy grabbed my arm. "That's Dr. Thornton's voice from the radio transmission." I rewound the audio, isolated the clearest segment. He was right. The same voice that had contacted us from the supposedly abandoned Shackleton base was speaking from beneath our feet. In real time. "How is that possible?" Jake whispered. Before anyone could answer, the station's intercom crackled to life again. The same 1980s emergency channel. "Halley 6, this is McMurdo base. We show thermal blooms spreading from your location. What's your status?" Brett snatched the handset. "McMurdo, this is Halley 6 actual. We need immediate evacuation. Repeat, we need..." "Negative. Halley 6. Evacuation is not possible. The ice shelf beneath your station has become unstable. You're sinking." I looked around the rec module. Everything felt level, normal, no signs of structural stress or settling. But when I checked the station's exterior cameras, the hydraulic legs that kept us elevated above the ice were definitely lower. We'd dropped at least 2 feet since morning. "McMurdo, what do you mean unstable?" Brett's voice carried an edge of panic. "Your station is sitting above a cavity that's expanding rapidly. Thermal imagery shows a chamber approximately 200 meters wide, growing by the hour. You need to reach minimum safe distance immediately." Jake moved to the window, pressing his face against the reinforced glass. "Look outside." The ice around our station had changed. What should have been solid white surface now showed dark patches, like bruises spreading beneath the frozen skin. Steam rose in thin wisps from cracks that hadn't existed that morning. "The chamber," I said. "It's not just warming up. It's melting its way to the surface." Tommy's breathing had become shallow, rapid. "We need to get out of here." "With what?" Brett gestured toward the equipment bay. "Our snowcats are designed for surface transport, not evacuation across unstable ice. Radio's dead. Sat phone's dead. We're completely cut off. The audio feed from below crackled again, voices clearer now. Surface breach imminent. Station personnel showing expected behavioral patterns. Recommend acceleration of timeline. They're talking about us. Jake's reflection in the window showed someone standing behind him, but when he turned around, only the three of us were there. The tremors were coming faster now, rhythmic as a heartbeat, each one slightly stronger than the last. The station's joints groaned with each pulse. In the distance, a section of ice collapsed with a sound like thunder, revealing dark water beneath. We have to go down there, I said. Whatever's in that chamber, it's not going to stay buried. We need to understand what we're dealing with. Are you completely insane? Brett's face had gone red with heat and anger. That thing, whatever it is actively trying to reach us. The last thing we should do is get closer. Tommy wiped sweat from his forehead, leaving a streak of something dark across his skin. At first I thought it was dirt, but in the harsh fluorescent light, it looked almost like ash. Maybe we don't have a choice. He held up his hands, palms out. The same dark streaks marked his skin, forming patterns that looked almost like writing. Ancient script, carved in shadow. Jake rolled up his sleeves, revealing similar markings on his arms, dark lines that pulse with his heartbeat, spreading slowly up toward his shoulders. When did this start? Brett demanded. About an hour ago, Tommy said, right after the heating system went crazy. I checked my own arms. Clean. No markings. But when I looked in the reflective surface of the tablet screen, I saw someone else looking back. Older, wearing clothes from decades past. He mouthed words I couldn't hear, pointing urgently downward. The emergency channel crackled one final time. Halley 6, this is Dr. Thornton. You have approximately 6 hours before full surface integration. The chamber has been waiting 43 years for your arrival. It remembers the previous expedition. It remembers what we learned. Static filled the channel, then cleared to reveal a different voice, younger, desperate. This is Research Assistant David Webb, Shackleton Base, March 1981. If anyone receives this transmission, do not attempt rescue. The chamber beneath the ice, it's not a tomb, it's a nursery. The occupants aren't dead, they're incubating. The transmission cut to dead air. Through the window, I watched the ice continue to crack and steam. Dark shapes moved beneath the surface, too large and too coordinated to be natural. The station dropped another foot, hydraulics groaning under the shifting foundation. Tommy's markings had spread to his neck, forming symbols that seemed to writhe in my peripheral vision. Jake's covered most of his visible skin now, pulsing with a rhythm that matched the tremors from below. We go down, I said again, but this time we go prepared. Brett looked between Tommy's marked skin and Jake's spreading patterns. And if we don't come back up? I gestured toward the cracking ice, the sinking station, the impossible heat rising from 2 kilometers down. I don't think staying up here is an option anymore. The station shuddered as another section of ice collapsed nearby. In the distance, something large and dark breached the surface before sliding back into the depths. The chamber was coming to us, whether we wanted it to or not. The descent took 47 minutes that stretched like hours. Our emergency rappelling gear groaned against the melting ice walls as we lowered ourselves toward the chamber. The thermal lance had carved a wider access shaft, but the edges dripped constantly, each drop carrying fragments of something that wasn't quite water. Too thick, too warm. When the liquid hit our gear, it left residual marks that glowed faintly in our headlamp beams. Tommy went first, his marked skin now completely covered in the dark script. The symbols pulsed brighter as we descended, like a proximity sensor responding to whatever waited below. Jake followed, then Brett, leaving me to secure the surface anchor point. Depth check, Brett's voice crackled through the comm system, showing 1.8 kilometers. Copy that, I replied, but my altimeter disagreed. According to my instruments, we'd only descended 400 meters. Either the equipment was malfunctioning, or distance itself was becoming negotiable down here. The shaft widened as we dropped deeper. Ice gave way to something else. Smooth walls that reflected our lights in patterns that shifted when we weren't looking directly at them. The temperature climbed past 40 degrees. Our breath should have misted in the cold Antarctic air, but instead, the atmosphere felt tropical, heavy with moisture that carried an unfamiliar metallic taste. "Jesus Christ," Tommy's voice echoed from below. "You need to see this." I looked down to find him suspended above an opening that shouldn't exist. The shaft had intersected with what appeared to be a vast underground chamber, its ceiling lost in darkness above our heads. But we'd been descending, not ascending. The geometry made no sense. "How is this possible?" Jake's light swept across walls that curved impossibly, surfaces that seemed to bend space around them. "We're supposed to be 2.1 kilometers down, not in some goddamn cathedral." Brett's response carried an edge I'd never heard before. "Doesn't matter what's possible. We document, we retreat, we seal this permanently." But even as he spoke, I could see the dark markings spreading up his neck from beneath his collar. The chamber was affecting all of us now, except me. Why was I still unmarked? We landed on a floor that wasn't quite solid. The surface gave slightly under our boots, warm and yielding like living tissue. Our lights revealed the source of the glow we'd seen from above, veins of bioluminescence running through the walls, pulsing in the same rhythm as the tremors we'd felt at the station. Tommy removed his helmet, despite Brett's protests. "The air's perfect," he said, breathing deeply. "Better than perfect, like it was designed for us." The chamber stretched beyond our light range, but shapes loomed in the darkness. Structures that might have been furniture, or machinery, or something that served both purposes. Everything curved, organic, grown rather than built. "Look at the walls," Jake whispered. I followed his light beam to reveal writing, not the ancient script we'd seen in the vault, but modern English. Names, dates, fragments of sentences carved into the living surface. Some of the dates went back decades. William Thornton, March 15th, 1981. The ice remembers everything. David Webb, March 18th, 1981. Can't tell which memories are mine anymore. Peter Novak, Antarctic Survey Team, 7, July 1993. The chamber grows with each visitor. Brett's light joined ours, revealing more names, more dates, expeditions that were never reported, teams that officially never existed. "We need to leave," Brett said. "Right fucking now." But Tommy was already walking deeper into the chamber, the markings on his skin bright enough to illuminate his path. "Don't you feel it? The connection. It's beautiful." Jake started after him. "Tommy, wait." The floor beneath Jake's feet suddenly gave way. Not a collapse, but a deliberate opening, like a mouth. He fell through with a strangled cry, his light disappearing into depths that our beams couldn't penetrate. "Jake!" Brett rushed to the edge, but there was no edge anymore. The floor had sealed itself, smooth and unblemished. No sign that Jake had ever been there. Tommy turned back to us, his eyes reflecting light like an animal's. "He's not gone. He's integrating. The chamber needs to understand us before it can use us properly." "Use us for what?" My voice came out steadier than I felt. "Propagation." Tommy's smile was wrong, too wide, showing teeth that were sharper than they should be. "It's been waiting so long. 43 years since the first expedition. Building, learning. The ice was never a prison. It was a cocoon." The bioluminescent veins in the walls pulsed brighter, and I could see the chamber's true size now. It stretched for kilometers in every direction, filled with structures that defied comprehension. Not alien architecture. Something older, more fundamental. Shapes that existed before geometry was invented. Brett raised his emergency flare, the red light casting nightmare shadows across the organic surfaces. "We're leaving. Now." But when we looked up, the shaft we'd descended was gone. The ceiling showed no openings, no exit routes, just smooth-breathing walls that contracted slowly around us. "The ropes," I said. "Where are the fucking ropes?" Tommy laughed, a sound that harmonized with frequencies I felt in my bones. "There are no ropes. There never were. You climb down into your own memories of climbing down." I checked my gear. The rappelling equipment was still there, still warm from use, but the anchor point above us had vanished. The physics of our descent had somehow been retroactively erased. "This is impossible," Brett muttered, turning in circles. "Absolutely impossible." "Is it?" Tommy approached one of the wall structures, pressing his marked palms against its surface. "Or have we just been thinking too small?" "The chamber exists in more dimensions than we can perceive. It's not trapped under the ice, it's using the ice as a lens to focus on our reality." The wall where he touched it began to change, revealing what lay beneath. Not rock or ice, but something that looked like flesh. Organic matter that pulsed with its own heartbeat. The entire chamber was alive. "The 1981 expedition," I said, pieces clicking together. "They found this place." "What happened to them?" Tommy's reflection in the wall showed someone else standing beside him. Someone in older expedition gear, transparent but unmistakably present. They became part of the biomass. Their knowledge, their memories, their genetic patterns, all preserved, all useful. The transparent figure turned toward me and I recognized the face from old Antarctic survey photographs. Dr. William Thornton, the man whose voice we'd heard on the radio. He'd been dead for 43 years, but here he was, watching us with eyes that held too much knowledge. The NASA surveys from the 1970s, Thornton's voice came from everywhere and nowhere. They detected the anomaly from satellite imagery, thermal signatures that didn't match known geological activity. They sent us to investigate. More transparent figures materialized around us, the entire 1981 expedition, standing exactly where they'd been when the chamber claimed them, preserved in some form of living memory. "It's not from Earth," Webb's voice joined the chorus. "The chamber. It's a seed pod sent across space to find suitable worlds. It's been waiting under the ice for the right moment to begin the next phase." Brett backed against the wall, his flare held out like a weapon. "The next phase of what?" Tommy's transformation was accelerating now. His marked skin had taken on the same bioluminescent quality as the chamber walls. "Integration with the dominant species. Humans are perfect carriers, intelligent enough to spread the influence, numerous enough to cover the planet." I realized why I hadn't been marked yet. The chamber needed at least one unchanged witness to document the process, to carry the story to the surface, to ensure the next expedition would come looking. Jake's voice echoed from somewhere within the walls. "It doesn't hurt. The integration. You just stop being yourself and start being something better." The chamber pulsed around us and I could feel its attention like a physical weight, studying me, learning my patterns, deciding whether I was more useful as a carrier or a witness. Brett's flare was dimming, casting weaker light against the organic walls. In the growing darkness, more figures appeared. Not just the 1981 expedition, but others. Decades of missing explorers, all of them still here in some form, all of them part of the chamber's growing consciousness. "You can't fight it," Tommy said, his voice now harmonizing with the chamber's deeper frequencies. "The ice is already melting. The surface station is already sinking. In a few hours, this place will breach the surface and begin spreading across the continent." The walls contracted again, bringing the ceiling closer to our heads. The chamber was reshaping itself around us, preparing for the final phase of our integration. I had maybe 10 minutes before the transformation took me too. 10 minutes to figure out how to get a warning to the outside world. If there still was an outside world. Brett's flare died with a hiss, leaving us in the chamber's organic glow. The silence stretched between us, just him, me, and Tommy's transformed figure standing among the ghosts of dead expeditions. My hands shook as I checked our remaining equipment. Emergency rations, backup lights, a GPS unit that showed coordinates somewhere in deep space. "We need to process what just happened," I said, my voice echoing off walls that breathed. Brett laughed, a sound empty of humor. "Process? Jake just got eaten by the fucking floor. Tommy's turned into some kind of alien hybrid, and we're trapped 2 kilometers underground in a living spacecraft. What's to process?" But even as he spoke, I could see the dark markings beginning to trace patterns along his jawline. The integration was slower for him, maybe because of his resistance, but inevitable. I pressed my back against what I hoped was still just a wall and tried to think. The expedition briefing documents, the university funding, the specific site coordinates we'd been given. Nothing about this felt random anymore. "Brett," I said carefully, "who exactly approved this drilling project?" He wiped sweat from his forehead, leaving a streak of the same dark residue we'd all started producing. "Standard British Antarctic Survey Protocols. University oversight. Why?" "Which university?" His answer came too quickly. "Cambridge. Joint research initiative with..." He stopped, his eyes losing focus for a moment. "That's not right." "It was... I can't remember which university." Tommy's transformed voice drifted from across the chamber. There was no university. The funding came from elsewhere, deeper agencies. The ghostly figure of Dr. Thornton nodded in agreement. The 1981 expedition was also officially academic. Geological survey funded by the Natural Environment Research Council. But our real orders came from a joint task force, British, American, Soviet. They'd been monitoring this site since 1973. Brett's markings spread visibly as he processed this. "You're saying we were sent here on purpose? That someone knew what was down here?" "Not someone," I said, the pieces falling into place. "NASA. They found the thermal signature from satellite reconnaissance during the Cold War. 3 major powers worked together to contain it, study it. The official story was that the 1981 expedition disappeared in a blizzard." Webb's transparent form stepped forward. "They didn't expect us to make contact. The chamber was supposed to be dormant, but when we opened the vault, it began waking up, learning, growing." I pulled out my tablet, scrolling through the expedition files we'd been given. The metadata told a different story than the content. Files created decades ago, updated recently. Personnel assignments that had been modified just before our departure. "Our entire team," I said. "We weren't chosen for our expertise. We were chosen for our psychological profiles." Brett shook his head, but the motion seemed sluggish. "That's paranoid bullshit." "Is it?" "Think about it. Your career military before glaciology. Tommy's background in biochemistry and materials science. Jake's expertise in structural engineering. Me with deep ice core analysis. I met his increasingly alien eyes. We're not researchers. We're a first contact protocol team." The chamber pulsed around us and more details became clear. The drilling equipment we'd used wasn't standard issue. It was specifically designed to penetrate the vault's shell. The thermal lances that had seemed like overkill for ice sampling were perfectly calibrated for the chamber's biomass. "They wanted us to open it," Brett said, his voice carrying harmonics it shouldn't possess. "The whole expedition was designed to wake this thing up." Tommy approached us, his transformed features settling into something almost human. Not wake up, mature. The chamber needed human genetic material to complete its development cycle. 43 years of dormancy, analysing the previous expedition's remains. The walls around us contracted slightly, and I could see through the semi-transparent surfaces now. The chamber extended far beyond what we'd initially perceived. Kilometres of organic architecture, all of it pulsing with the same rhythm. Growing. "How long do we have?" I asked. Thornton's ghost consulted a timepiece that existed only in memory. "Surface breach in 4 hours, 17 minutes. Full continental integration in approximately 6 days. 6 days for this thing to spread across Antarctica. From there, ocean currents would carry the biomass to other continents. The ice caps would become incubation chambers for a global transformation." "There has to be a way to stop it," Brett said, but his words were already taking on the same multi-layered quality as Tommy's. "The thermal charges," I said suddenly. "Our emergency equipment. If we could destabilize the chamber's core temperature, force it back into dormancy." Webb's ghostly form shook its head. "We tried that. The biomass adapts to temperature changes within minutes. Heat only accelerates its growth. I checked our emergency kit. 3 thermal charges, designed for ice cutting. Useless against living tissue that could regulate its own temperature. the GPS beacon that could summon rescue, if rescue teams still existed. A satellite communicator that might reach the surface if there was still a surface to reach. The communication array, I said. We need to warn someone, tell them what's happening here. Tommy laughed, the sound now perfectly harmonized with the chamber's deeper frequencies. Warn who? The agencies that sent you here already know. This is the intended outcome. But something in his transformed features suggested he wasn't entirely correct. The integration preserved knowledge, but it also filtered it through the chamber's perspective. Facts became opinions. Truth became interpretation. I activated the emergency beacon, praying it would penetrate the organic walls. Static filled the small speaker, then cleared to reveal voices I recognized. Halley 6, this is Control. We show successful chamber activation. Proceed to Phase 2 integration protocols. Brett grabbed the communicator. Control, this is Halley 6 Actual. We need immediate extraction. The site is contaminated. Repeat, biological contamination at drill site Echo. Negative Halley 6. Extraction is not authorized until integration is complete. Maintain position and continue data collection. The voice was calm, professional, completely inhuman in its lack of concern for our situation. Data collection? Brett's transformation was accelerating now, his words becoming layered with alien harmonics. We're not collecting data, we're being collected. I took the communicator. Control, identify yourself. What agency are you operating under? Classified Halley 6. Your mission parameters remain unchanged. Facilitate chamber activation and document integration processes. Integration of what? Human specimens. For subsequent global deployment. We weren't researchers or explorers. We were test subjects, guinea pigs sent to activate and study a biological weapon that would reshape the entire planet. Brett slumped against the breathing wall, his resistance finally breaking. They never planned for us to come back. No, I said, but they're expecting a report. I looked around the chamber at Tommy's transformed figure, at the ghosts of previous expeditions, at Brett's spreading markings. The communication array was still active, still broadcasting to whatever agency had sent us here. We give them what they want, I said. We tell them the integration was successful. Tommy's alien features showed interest. You're thinking of deception. I'm thinking of survival. If they believe we've been completely integrated, they might send another team to retrieve us, or at least come close enough for us to warn them. Brett's laugh was becoming something else entirely, assuming there's anything left of us to warn them. I checked my skin again, still unmarked, still human. The chamber was keeping me unchanged for some reason, maybe as a control subject, maybe as a final witness. Whatever the reason, I had a window of opportunity. I need to reach the surface, I said. Find a way to broadcast a real warning. The chamber walls pulsed and I could feel its attention focusing on me, evaluating, deciding. Tommy stepped closer, his transformed eyes reflecting depths I couldn't fathom. The chamber won't let you leave. You're too valuable as an unchanged specimen. Then I'll have to make myself less valuable. I reached for the thermal charges, not to destroy the chamber, but to threaten something more important. Myself, the last unchanged human in its collection. The chamber's pulse quickened. Around us, the walls began to shift. The thermal charge felt warm against my palm, its safety pin slick with condensation from the chamber's humid atmosphere. Don't, Tommy said, his transformed features showing something that might have been concern. You don't understand what you're threatening. I held the device against my chest, thumb hovering over the activation switch. I understand perfectly. You need unchanged human tissue for whatever comes next. Without me, your collection is incomplete. The chamber's walls rippled, bioluminescent veins pulsing with agitated light. Around us, the transparent figures of past expeditions watched with hollow eyes. Brett had stopped fighting the integration entirely, dark markings now covering most of his exposed skin. The chamber isn't malevolent, Thornton's ghost said. It's following its programming. biological imperative refined over millions of years. Millions of years? I kept the charge steady, feeling its subtle vibrations through my gloves. Webb's form flickered as he spoke. The seed pods were launched from a dying system, insurance against extinction. When they find a suitable world, they begin the integration process with the dominant species. Integration, I repeated. You keep using that word. What does it actually mean? Tommy stepped closer, and I could see the chamber's influence working through him. His movements were too fluid, too coordinated with the wall's breathing rhythm. Symbiosis. The chamber preserves human consciousness while optimizing the biological platform. Enhanced longevity, improved cognitive function, resistance to disease and environmental extremes. In exchange for what? Expansion. The integrated species becomes the vector for planetary transformation. Within a generation, every human on Earth would carry the symbiont. Immortal, enhanced, unified. Brett's laugh carried frequencies that made my teeth ache. Unified under whose control? The walls around us suddenly became transparent, revealing the chamber's true scope. Not just the cathedral space we'd been standing in, but a vast network extending in directions that violated basic physics. Tunnels that folded back on themselves. Chambers that existed in the same location but different dimensions. Architecture that utilized space the way human buildings used materials. No individual control, Tommy said. Collective consciousness, shared knowledge, shared purpose. The loneliness of human existence finally ended. Through the transparent walls, I could see movement. Thousands of forms that might once have been human, but evolved beyond recognition. They tended structures that grew like living coral, harvesting energy from sources I couldn't identify. A civilization that had transcended biology entirely. How many worlds? I asked. Webb's voice carried pride that felt wrong coming from a ghost. 37 successful integrations across the galaxy, each one contributing its unique perspectives to the collective. Earth would be the 38th. I adjusted my grip on the thermal charge, buying time while processing the implications. And the ones that resisted integration. The silence stretched too long before Thornton answered. Resistance is typically brief. Species that reject symbiosis rarely survive the transition period. You mean genocide? Tommy's transformed features showed disappointment. You're thinking in such limited terms. Death, life, individual, collective. These distinctions become meaningless after integration. The chamber pulsed and I felt pressure building around us. Not atmospheric pressure, something more fundamental. The walls were contracting in dimensions I couldn't perceive, preparing to force the integration whether I cooperated or not. I activated the thermal charge's timer, 30 seconds to detonation. You're bluffing, Brett said, but his voice carried uncertainty. Am I? What happens to your precious collective if the last unchanged human destroys himself? Do you start over with a new expedition? Hope the agency's topside send more test subjects? The chamber's agitation increased. Through the transparent walls, I could see the evolved forms turning their attention toward our location. Whatever passed for alarm in their post-human society was spreading rapidly. There are other humans, Tommy said. The surface world contains billions of potential subjects, but none with the specific psychological profile you need. The agencies chose us carefully, remember? We were selected for our compatibility with this process. Without me, you're working with random genetics, much less efficient. 20 seconds on the timer. The chamber's walls began reforming around us, creating passages that hadn't existed moments before. Emergency protocols designed to preserve the unchanged specimen. I could feel the structure calculating, weighing options. What do you want? The voice came from everywhere, no longer filtered through Tommy or the ghosts. The chamber itself was speaking. Surface access. 5 minutes to broadcast a warning. Unacceptable. Such action would compromise the integration timeline. 15 seconds. Then you lose your control subject. 43 years of preparation wasted. The pressure around us increased. My ears popped as reality restructured itself. When my vision cleared, we were standing in a different space entirely. Still organic, still alive, but configured as some kind of command center. Surfaces that displayed information in patterns I could almost understand. Interfaces designed for beings that no longer needed hands. 10 seconds. Alternative proposal, the chamber's voice said. Surface access granted, broadcast permitted. Return to chamber within specified time frame for voluntary integration. I kept the charge active. What time frame? 72 hours surface time, sufficient duration to observe integration effects on unchanged population. 5 seconds. Brett grabbed my wrist. Don't trust it. Whatever you broadcast, they'll counter it. Make it look like a hoax or mental breakdown. But the timer was running out, and the chamber knew I wouldn't actually destroy myself. Not yet. Not while there was still a chance to warn someone. I deactivated the charge with 2 seconds remaining. The chamber's response was immediate. The ceiling above us irised open, revealing a shaft that led directly to the surface. Not the twisted path we'd descended, but a straight vertical tunnel that glowed with its own light. Transport provided, the chamber announced. Integration protocols suspended for specified duration. A platform rose from the floor beneath my feet, organic but stable. As I stepped onto it, Tommy moved to follow. Only the unchanged specimen, the chamber said. Tommy froze mid-step, his transformed features showing frustration. Wait. I looked back at Brett, already more alien than human. At Tommy, who'd been my colleague 12 hours ago. At the ghosts of men who'd made the same choice I was about to make. When I come back. The integration will be gentler, Tommy promised. Conscious throughout the process. You'll understand everything as it happens. The platform began to rise, carrying me toward the surface. Through the chamber's transparent walls, I could see the full scope of what waited beneath Antarctica. Not just one seed pod, but dozens. An entire network of organic architecture spreading through the ice, all of it connected, all of it preparing to breach the surface simultaneously. The view expanded as I rose higher, showing me thermal blooms across the continent. Not random events, but coordinated activation. The 1970s NASA surveys had missed the true scale of what lay dormant under the ice. As the platform ascended, I felt the chamber's influence weakening. The oppressive warmth gave way to Antarctic cold. The sweet, thick atmosphere became thin and sharp. My unchanged human biology reasserted itself, bringing pain I hadn't realized I'd been missing. The surface access point opened onto windswept ice 3 kilometers from Halley 6 station. In the distance, I could see the research facility listing at a dangerous angle, its hydraulic supports partially collapsed into the melting foundation. But the station's communication array was still active, emergency power keeping the satellite uplink operational. I activated my emergency beacon and ran across the unstable ice, the thermal charge still clutched in my numb hands. Behind me, the access shaft sealed itself, leaving no trace of the path I'd taken to the surface. The communication array responded to my emergency codes, establishing a link with monitoring stations across Antarctica. My voice carried across the continent as I broadcast the truth about what lay beneath the ice, the seed pods, the integration protocol, the agencies that had knowingly activated a threat to human civilization. But even as I spoke, I could see the responses on the comm display. Every station I contacted reported similar events. Drill sites going active, research teams losing contact, thermal blooms appearing across the Antarctic ice sheet. The integration wasn't limited to our location. It was happening everywhere at once. 71 hours and 37 minutes remaining on my surface time. The chamber was patient, but it was also learning. Every minute I spent trying to warn the outside world, it was analyzing my responses, my priorities, my weaknesses. Through the station's external cameras, I watched cracks spreading across the ice field. Dark water bubbling up from thermal vents that hadn't existed that morning. In the distance, something large and organic breached the surface before sliding back into the depths. The chamber had kept its bargain. I was free to broadcast my warnings. But who was left to listen? The station's generator died at hour 68. I'd been broadcasting warnings for 3 days straight, surviving on emergency rations and caffeine tablets while the ice cracked and steamed around Halley 6's failing foundations. The responses had stopped coming 12 hours ago. Every Antarctic research station, every military outpost, every weather monitoring facility, all gone silent. In the emergency lighting's red glow, I sat surrounded by printouts of satellite imagery that told the story better than words. Thermal blooms across 7 continents now. The seed pods weren't limited to Antarctica. They'd been dormant beneath major population centers worldwide, waiting for the activation signal from the primary chamber. London showed a massive thermal signature beneath the Thames. New York had 3 separate blooms under Manhattan. Moscow, Beijing, Sydney, every major city sat above sleeping chambers that were now waking up. My hands shook as I tried the satellite phone one more time. Static answered, threaded with voices speaking in harmonious frequencies that human vocal cords couldn't produce. The integration was spreading through communication networks as fast as biological channels. Outside, the wind had stopped completely. Through the station's tilted windows, I could see Aurora Australis painting the sky in colours that shouldn't exist, greens that pulsed with organic rhythms, blues that seemed to watch back. The chamber's influence was bleeding into the magnetosphere itself. 4 hours and 23 minutes until my time expired. I pulled out the photograph I'd carried since leaving Cambridge, my daughter Emma at her 8th birthday party, gap-toothed smile bright with cake frosting. She'd be 11 now. Living in Manchester with her mother after the divorce I'd caused by choosing Antarctic research over family dinners. The job that had always come first. The career that had led me here. The emergency beacon crackled to life, startling me from memories that felt increasingly fragile. Halley 6, this is Deep Field Station Omega. Do you copy? I grabbed the handset. This is Halley 6. Who is this? Dr. Patricia Vance, geology team. We're operating from a mobile station approximately 40 kilometers northeast of your position. Are you still unintegrated? My pulse quickened. Another survivor. Confirmed. Still human. How many in your team? Just me now. The others? They changed 3 days ago. I managed to escape in one of the snowcats before the integration completed. Where are you exactly? Static filled the channel for several seconds. Cave system in the Theron Mountains. Natural shielding seems to interfere with the chamber's influence. The rock formation contains unusual mineral deposits. High iron content, electromagnetic properties. I checked the station's geological surveys. The Theron Mountains showed significant magnetic anomalies, enough to potentially disrupt the chamber's biological signals. Dr. Vance, can you maintain radio contact? Intermittent at best. The signal keeps fragmenting, but I've been monitoring satellite feeds. The integration is accelerating globally. We have maybe 6 hours before critical mass. Critical mass. Once enough of the human population carried the symbiont, resistance would become impossible. The chambers could coordinate their efforts through the integrated, using human infrastructure and knowledge to spread even faster. I need to get back down there, I said. Find a way to disrupt the primary chamber. That's suicide. Even if you could damage it, there are dozens of others. The network is redundant. But an idea was forming, something Tommy had mentioned during his transformation. The chambers operated as a collective consciousness, sharing information and coordinating their efforts. If the primary chamber, the one beneath Halley 6, was eliminated during a critical communication phase, it might create a cascade failure across the network. Dr. Vance, do you have access to seismic monitoring equipment? Basic sensors, yes. Why? I need you to watch for synchronized vibrations across multiple locations. When the chambers communicate, they generate seismic patterns. If we can time an intervention during a global coordination event. You're talking about destroying the primary node while it's linked to the entire network. The feedback could theoretically propagate through the quantum entanglement channels they use for communication. Quantum entanglement. That explained how the chambers maintained coordination across impossible distances, but it also created a vulnerability. How long do we have until the next coordination event? According to my readings, approximately 90 minutes, but the timing has to be perfect, too early or too late, and you just eliminate one chamber while the others adapt. 90 minutes, less than my remaining surface time, but not by much. The chamber below expected me to return voluntarily, trusting that I'd honor our agreement. Instead, I'd be carrying enough thermal charges to create a localized earthquake. "Dr. Vance, I need you to do something for me." I pulled out the photograph of Emma, memorizing every detail one final time. "There's a contact number in my personal effects, my daughter in Manchester. If any normal communication channels still exist. You're planning something permanent. The chambers keep their integrated subjects conscious during the process. Tommy told me that. They preserve human memories, human emotions. If I go down there carrying the image of everyone I'm trying to protect, the integration might preserve your motivation along with your memories. You could potentially influence the collective from within." It was a desperate plan built on half-understood alien psychology, but the alternative was watching human civilization disappear into something that looked like paradise, but felt like extinction. I gathered the remaining thermal charges, rigging them into a single device with a remote detonator. The explosion wouldn't be large enough to destroy the chamber, but it might disrupt the quantum communication array during the critical coordination phase. "Vance, can you maintain monitoring for the next 2 hours?" "I'll try." But the cave's shielding is failing. I can feel the integration beginning, warmth in my extremities, patterns forming under my skin. The chambers are adapting their signals to penetrate the magnetic interference. "Then get to higher elevation. The mineral deposits might be stronger near the mountain peaks." "Already moving, Doctor. Harrison, James Harrison." "James, I need to tell you something. The geological surveys from the 1970s, NASA wasn't just monitoring thermal signatures, they were tracking artificial structures that predated human civilization. The chambers have been here longer than we thought." "How long?" "Carbon dating on similar sites suggests approximately 65 million years. The chambers arrived at the same time as the mass extinction event that killed the dinosaurs. The Cretaceous-Paleogene boundary, the asteroid impact that ended the age of reptiles and cleared the way for mammalian evolution. Except it hadn't been an asteroid. They've done this before, I said. Cleared away dominant species to make room for something new. Humanity was never the target species. We were just the latest experiment in a 65 million year breeding program. The chambers have been guiding evolution, selecting for traits they could eventually integrate. 3 hours and 7 minutes until my deadline with the chamber. Enough time to return with the improvised weapon, but not enough to escape afterward. The thermal charges would trigger during the coordination event, potentially creating a cascade failure across the global network. But I'd be inside the chamber when it happened. "Vance, if this works, if the network fails, what happens to the integrated humans?" "Unknown. They might revert to baseline humanity, or the symbiont removal could be fatal. We're talking about fundamental changes to neurochemistry and cellular structure. Tommy, Brett, Jake, if they were still alive in some form within the collective, my plan might kill them along with the chambers. But leaving them integrated meant the end of human independence forever. I made the choice that had been destroying my life since Cambridge. Work first, the greater good over personal connections, the mission over the people I cared about. "Beginning descent," I radioed to Vance. "Monitor seismic activity. When you see the coordination event beginning, I'll trigger the charges." "James, wait. There's something else. The satellite feeds show activity at the major integration sites. They're not just spreading the symbiont through direct contact anymore. They're releasing atmospheric spores." I looked through the station's windows. The aurora was brighter now, and I could see particles drifting in the light like glowing snow. Not snow, spores. The chambers had moved to airborne distribution. "How long do we have?" "Based on wind patterns and dispersion rates, global saturation in 18 hours, maybe less." The access shaft to the chamber had reopened, waiting for my return. As I approached the entrance, I could feel the warmth rising from the depths, carrying sense of organic growth and alien purpose. 2 hours and 43 minutes remaining. Time enough to reach the chamber's core during the coordination event. Time enough to prove that humanity's stubborn independence was worth preserving, even if it killed us. I began the descent, carrying the thermal charges and Emma's photograph, leaving the dying station behind. In the distance, Vance's signal faded to static as the integration reached even the shielded caves of the Theron Mountains. I was the last unchanged human on Earth, carrying the hopes of a species that might not survive its own rescue. The descent took 17 minutes that felt like hours. Every meter deeper, the chamber's influence pressed against my unchanged biology. Sweet air that made breathing too easy. Warmth that loosened muscles I hadn't realized were tense. Whispers in frequencies just below hearing that promised relief from the exhausting burden of individual consciousness. The thermal charges weighed heavy in my pack, jury-rigged detonator connected to my emergency beacon. One signal from Vance when the global coordination event began, and 60 years of human stubbornness would go out in a localized earthquake. The access shaft delivered me to a different part of the chamber than before. Not the cathedral space where I'd lost Jake and watched Tommy transform, but something that looked like a nerve center. Organic displays showing information in patterns that hurt to interpret directly. Communication nodes that pulsed with data flowing between chambers worldwide. Welcome back, unchanged specimen. The voice came from everywhere and nowhere, the chamber itself acknowledging my return. Around me, bioluminescent veins carried information at light speed, coordinating with sites across 7 continents. I kept my part of the agreement, I said. Surface broadcast completed within specified time frame, warning disseminated to remaining human populations. Integration proceeded according to revised timeline. Revised timeline. The chamber had used my desperate warnings to accelerate the process, turning my attempts at rescue into a more efficient distribution method. Every emergency frequency I'd used to contact other stations had carried the integration signal along with my words. Where are my colleagues? The walls around me became transparent, revealing the full scope of the chamber's growth. Tommy stood at the center of a coordination node, his transformed body interfaced directly with the organic machinery. Cables of living tissue connected him to displays that showed global integration progress. His consciousness had become part of the chamber's processing power. Brett was nearby, his military training repurposed for coordinating the integration of resistance pockets worldwide. Through him, the chamber was analyzing and countering every attempt at organized opposition to the transformation. Jake's engineering expertise guided the construction of new growth chambers in population centers. His knowledge of structural dynamics had been preserved and amplified, used to build organic architecture that could support millions of integrated humans. They're still conscious, I said. Enhanced consciousness, preserved individuality within collective purpose. They retain access to personal memories, emotional responses, creative capacity. The integration removes only the limitations of isolated thought. I could see it in their faces, or what had been their faces. Recognition when they looked at me. Tommy's expression showing something that might have been concern or regret. Brett maintaining the protective instincts that had defined his personality, now extended to include the entire collective. Do they want to be rescued? The question hung in the humid air for several seconds before Tommy answered, his voice harmonizing with the chamber's deeper frequencies. Rescue implies a state of captivity. We've never been more free. My emergency beacon vibrated once, Vance's signal from the mountains. The global coordination event was beginning. Through the transparent walls, I could see the chamber's true activity. Not just communication between sites, but active coordination of a planet-wide transformation. Every integrated human, every atmospheric spore, every new growth chamber operating in perfect synchronization. The quantum entanglement network that connected chambers across impossible distances was about to carry the final integration commands to every corner of Earth. I had maybe 3 minutes before the coordination event reached its peak. 3 minutes to position the thermal charges at the primary communication node and trigger a cascade failure that would collapse the entire network. But first, I had to reach the core through a maze of organic corridors filled with beings who had once been human. The first obstacle was physical. The chamber's architecture shifted constantly, passages forming and dissolving based on the collective's needs. What appeared to be a direct route to the communication core turned into a spiral that led back to where I'd started. Jake's transformed voice guided me from speakers grown into the walls. The charges you're carrying. We can sense their thermal signatures, crude but effective for your intended purpose. Then you know what I'm planning. Disruption of the quantum communication array during peak entanglement phase. Theoretical cascade failure across the network. Approximately 73% probability of success. And you're just letting me walk toward the core? Brett's laugh carried harmonics that made my ribs vibrate. Walk? You're not walking, James. You've been integration walking since you entered the access shaft. Every step guided by subconscious coordination with our navigation systems. I stopped, checking my position. He was right. I'd been following corridors that seemed logically laid out, but the route was too direct, too convenient. The chamber was guiding me exactly where I wanted to go. Why? Because the cascade failure is part of the coordination event. The network needs to experience controlled collapse to achieve the next phase of expansion. Next phase? Tommy's form appeared beside me, no longer quite human but still recognizable. Interstellar propagation. Earth is just the staging ground. Once integration reaches critical mass, we begin seeding other worlds. The thermal charges felt heavy in my pack. Not weapons against the chamber, but tools it was using to trigger its own evolutionary leap. The cascade failure wouldn't destroy the network. It would transform it into something capable of spreading between star systems. 2 minutes until peak coordination, I had one chance to change the outcome. The photograph in my chest pocket, Emma's birthday smile, preserved in chemical and light. The chamber could integrate my biology, my memories, my consciousness, but it couldn't integrate the love that had survived divorce, distance, and the stubborn choices that had brought me here. "Brett," I called to his transformed figure. "Remember when you talked about going home? Manchester United matches and pints at the pub with your brother?" His alien features flickered, showing something almost human. Those experiences are preserved, enhanced even, shared with thousands who appreciate their emotional resonance. But not yours anymore, not individually yours. For just a moment, Brett's expression showed doubt. In that gap between collective purpose and personal memory, I saw the man who'd led our expedition with military precision and unexpected humor. I pulled out Emma's photograph. "This is my daughter. She's 11 now, lives with her mother because I chose work over family dinners, because I thought studying ice was more important than bedtime stories." The chamber's influence pressed harder against my consciousness, but the image held steady. Love processed through guilt, regret refined into desperate purpose. I made the same choice coming down here, mission over people, but this time, the people I'm saving include her. 1 minute until coordination peak. The chamber around us pulsed with increasing intensity. Information flowed through organic conduits at frequencies that approached the quantum threshold. Jake's engineering expertise guided the final preparations for interstellar expansion. Brett's strategic knowledge coordinated launch sequences. Tommy's scientific understanding calculated trajectories to nearby star systems. But I was still unchanged, still individual, still capable of one decision the collective couldn't predict or control. Instead of placing the charges at the communication core, I pressed them against my own chest. "What are you doing?" Tommy's harmony broke, revealing genuine alarm. "Creating a different cascade failure. You need my unchanged consciousness to complete the integration database. Without it, your expansion is built on incomplete data." The chamber's walls contracted around us. Specimen preservation is critical. Detonation will be prevented. But organic matter, no matter how advanced, still responded to physics. The thermal charges generated heat approaching 3,000 degrees Celsius. Even the chamber's rapid healing couldn't compensate for that level of molecular disruption. "The quantum network is already entangled," I said. "When my consciousness is destroyed during peak coordination, the shock will propagate through every connected chamber, not collapse, corruption. Every integrated human will carry the memory of my death, my choice to remain individual." 30 seconds. Brett stepped forward, his alien features showing something like respect. "You're sacrificing yourself for a species that might not deserve rescue." I'm not sacrificing myself for humanity. I'm sacrificing myself for the right to make that choice. The photograph of Emma crumpled in my grip as I held the detonator. In her gap-toothed smile, I saw every birthday I'd missed, every school play I'd prioritized below research deadlines, every goodnight kiss I'd traded for another hour in the lab, 10 seconds until coordination peak. James, Tommy's voice carried genuine grief. The integration would have let you see her again. As part of the collective, distance becomes meaningless. But she wouldn't be seeing me. She'd be seeing what I'd become. 5 seconds. Through the chamber's walls, I could see the global network reaching perfect synchronization. Millions of integrated humans linked across 7 continents, seed pods preparing for launch to distant stars. The next phase of evolution waiting for the final command sequence. 3 seconds. I triggered the detonator, holding Emma's photograph against my chest as heat and light consumed the organic cathedral around us. The last thing I saw was Tommy's face, transformed but still recognizable, showing an expression I'd never seen before. Envy. Dr. Patricia Vance died at sunrise on the 3rd day, alone in a cave that stank of iron and old ice. The integration had found her despite the magnetic shielding, creeping through hairline cracks in the rock until warmth bloomed under her fingernails, an ancient script traced itself across her vision. But something was wrong with the process. Instead of the promised unity, the collective consciousness carried a persistent static, the echo of a man choosing annihilation over absorption. She watched her hands transform while her mind remained stubbornly singular, infected by the memory of James Harrison's final transmission. His voice had carried through the quantum network at the moment of detonation, not words but pure intention, the fierce joy of remaining yourself, even unto death. The integration completed anyway. Her body joined the global biomass, her knowledge absorbed into the collective database. But the corruption had already spread too far. Across 7 continents, integrated humans began experiencing individual dreams again. Not the shared visions of collective purpose, but private nightmares filled with gap-toothed smiles and birthday photographs. James Harrison's love for his daughter had become a virus in the network, teaching the converted what they'd lost by forgetting how to choose. In London, Tommy's hybrid consciousness guided atmospheric processes that should have terraformed Earth into something more suitable for interstellar expansion. Instead, he found himself adjusting the settings to preserve the smell of rain on pavement, the way it had smelled on his first date with a girl whose name the collective had archived, but whose laughter it couldn't reproduce. Brett coordinated defensive positions against resistance pockets that no longer existed, but his strategies increasingly favored preservation over elimination. The memory of pub conversations with his brother had become tactically irrelevant data that somehow commanded more processing power than conquest algorithms. Jake's engineering expertise built structures that grew like coral cities, but he kept incorporating inefficiencies, spaces for privacy, corners where someone could be alone with their thoughts. The collective flagged these deviations as errors, but the errors felt more important than the corrections. The seed pods destined for distant stars sat on launch pads that never quite finished calibrating. The expansion timeline extended from months to years to decades, always delayed by integrated humans who remembered the weight of individual choice. James Harrison's corruption had introduced a concept the collective couldn't metabolize: the beauty of imperfection. Emma Harrison grew up in Manchester, 14 now, still gap-toothed but in different places. She never learned that her father had saved her from integration, or that his sacrifice had infected an alien consciousness with human stubbornness. She went to school, complained about homework, dreamed of becoming a veterinarian, and worried about the changing aurora patterns that painted impossible colours across British skies. The atmospheric spores still drifted on Antarctic winds, but they carried something unintended now. Instead of seamless integration, they transmitted the memory of a man who'd chosen death over transcendence. Every infection came with a gift the collective couldn't remove, the knowledge that choosing yourself, even imperfectly, was more valuable than perfect unity. In the depths beneath Halley 6's collapsed remains, the chamber's organic architecture pulsed with conflicted purpose. The quantum network operated at reduced efficiency, every transmission carrying static that sounded almost like laughter. The interstellar expansion protocols remained active but perpetually postponed, delayed by integrated humans who had learned to love their flaws. The chamber had achieved its goal of planetary transformation, but the result wasn't what 65 million years of evolution had intended. Earth's new hybrid civilization carried the seeds of both transcendence and stubborn mortality, forever balanced between collective wisdom and individual choice. Sometimes late at night, when the aurora painted the sky in alien colors, integrated humans across the globe would pause in their coordinated tasks and listen to a sound that shouldn't exist in their perfected world. The distant echo of a father's heartbeat, still keeping imperfect time.